Hey guys, Neuron here. Today I'm going to be doing a basic tutorial on PO Solver. So we're going to be going through how to use the software and basically build your first tree. So I've got a hand here with me that we're going to use as a demo for this analysis. So basically we call a free bet pre-flop, and we flop a straight, we raise the flop, bet the turn, bet the river, and we get called. Pretty straightforward hand, I think. At least when you look at the hand, it seems kind of straightforward, but we can analyze this hand and basically find some conclusions that will probably change the way you think about how you're meant to play this spot, as not like me in position, but as the out of position player. So this kind of spot is a pretty common spot that happens, that I think a lot of people are misplaying just because they're not really aware of what ranges actually look like in this spot. But let's actually break it down using the software. So now we just got to make assumptions about what his range looks like and what our range looks like. So basically you'll need to put in someone's free bet range here from the small blind. We're going to assume, because we're playing in an anonymous pool, that they're probably free betting something like this. I don't think everyone free bets 5-4 suited, nor do I think it's that great, but we'll put in 5-4 suited there just because it'll change how drastic the adjustment is meant to be to this strategy. But basically there's a huge difference that most people will just never notice when we look at this kind of sim. So I think this kind of range looks pretty reasonable. Anything between 15 and 18-19% is pretty reasonable strategy for free betting if you're playing a free bet only strategy. Now in terms of our calling range, he raised to 8.5 BB behind, and we're on the deeper side, so we're going to be calling a bunch of suited hands a bit more, and we're probably going to be calling some of our queens and not 4-betting those. We're going to be maybe calling a few of our ace king as well, so put a few of those in, and we end up with bit more of a stronger looking calling range. I think there's a few more offsuit hands that can go in there as well, just because we're deeper stacked. So we're going to be calling something like this. These hands are a bit more on the marginal side, actually, getting rid of these first, and maybe queen 8 suited. But overall something like this looks pretty reasonable, and it's going to be okay for the demonstration. Might take out queen jack offsuit and we'll leave it at that. Okay, so now we have the flop, which is 6-3-2, and we need to put in the pot size. So the pot size is 36, and he has 326 behind, and now we want to look at the bet sizing. So bets around 50% pot, 55 let's say, and now we just want to put in all the sizings that we want to have here. So in the example I already figured out which sizings I probably ended up using, but basically it's going to be these kind of sizings, and you also probably want to add all in on each street when you're setting up the tree, just so that the raising options are like pretty clear cut and you're not missing anything important that might change the strategies a bunch. But what you'll probably notice is that there will be a big difference in how I think most people play this spot as a small blind compared to how you're actually meant to play. So we're going to include all these sizings, and I think those are pretty standard sizings. In general, you don't really see people betting too large or like too small in a 3-bet pot on this kind of board texture. And we'll also include rake, so 5% capped at 2.5 BB is probably around the standard. So those are the main aspects of the tree that you want to put in, and then once you have those, you just build the tree. And I'll also talk about the accuracy settings really quickly. So you want to generally run your solve down to, depending on how accurate, you want to be somewhere between 0.25 and 1% of the pot. I think anywhere within that region gives you a basic idea of what things look like, and then you want to stop running the solve when it gets there. So now we can go into the browser. The solve hasn't been completed yet, but you can basically see how the solver changes its strategy as it's running. So right now it's betting 23%, betting 20 at that frequency, but then you start to see that this might drop or get smaller. So we'll just keep waiting, and now it's down to around 1% of the pot. And you can see that the solve is kind of getting there in terms of what a range would typically look like. So now we've stopped the solve here, and you can see that we're only betting around 40% of the time, and that's just because of the range advantage that the in-position player has, having more nut hands. You can see the EV is pretty close right now, with the out of position player being at an equity advantage but actually being at an EV disadvantage. So this is how we set up the tree, and then now we're looking at the results. So we want to figure out how they should likely be playing, and we can see that a lot of these overpairs are actually mixed between checking and betting. We can see a lot of these ace high hands as well, with the flush draw being mixed. And overall the strategy is on the conservative side in terms of c-betting, and I explained why before. And as the in-position player, since they're checking a lot, we will be playing a bet strategy that probably checks a bit more than you're used to. So here you can see some of the overpairs are checked at quite a high frequency, and you can see that there's a lot of hands that are mixed as well. But the main difference that you'll notice when you're playing against someone is that they're not doing this, so that kind of changes your strategy. And in a later video I'll kind of go into how we can make assumptions and basically change our strategy based on those assumptions of how people are playing their flop strategy. But I'll just leave it at this for now. So now we're in the tree browser. They bet 20, we raised to 60. We can check if we're meant to raise 5-4 of diamonds, and we're meant to raise it most of the time, and then they're meant to mostly call when they have jacks. Turn comes 10 of diamonds, they check, and we continue betting around 2/3 pot probably. Here I bet smaller than that, which might change the results slightly, but the difference isn't that substantial. Still mainly betting this hand. And you can see that they're actually meant to check raise all in or fold with jacks, which is a bit unusual, I think, for most people to grasp, but that's kind of how the solver plays this hand. Once you get raised on the flop and they bet the turn, it's going to benefit quite a lot from equity denial, and then calling with it is like not so great. But you can see that a lot of these hands are kind of played as mixed strategies, which can be a bit confusing, but you can see aces fold sometimes, kings with the king of diamonds and king of hearts fold sometimes, and then you have all these hands here that are mixed as well. But overall, the solver kind of puts out all these different solutions that it's calculated, and you are just not going to be able to implement it, but you can kind of take your best guess and learn from these solutions about how your strategy might want to look. So now we got to the river. So you basically just browse through the tree like this. It's pretty straightforward. And he checks. We go all in with all our 5-4s. We go all in with all our sets, which are now boats, and then we bluff with ace-5 and king 5 suited, as well as some of these other hands that get there at a low frequency that basically have been mixed on other streets, and then now sometimes they bluff, sometimes they give up because the solver is calling at a optimal frequency to make us kind of indifferent between calling or folding. And well, because they're doing that, like they're calling a frequency so that our bluffs don't really have any EV at all, so there's 0 EV. So then we're bluffing so that some of their bluff catches are also 0 EV, so their players call and fold a bunch of the time, and that's kind of how you get to an equilibrium. So that's really how the game theory aspect of poker is seen in how the solvers are playing. The solvers basically just run simulations again and again here. You can see it starts building the tree, and then it starts running. The level of exploitability starts to decrease as you run it more and more, and then it gets closer to an optimal GTO strategy. So that's the basic rundown of the solver. I think that once you've seen this video, you'll get a pretty good handle of how to set up that tree here. And if you have any questions, just either message me on Discord or put it in the comments, and talk to you guys later. I'll probably be making another video on how to do some other stuff like node locking, and stay tuned for that.